Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to the IJIS Institute webinar series. Today's topic is security and privacy in artificial intelligence. Of course, that's a broad topic. And what we'll be focusing on is what are some of the challenges we face as we're implementing AI in our organizations or agencies. And what we want to explore further is the concept of privacy by design and how it fits or meets the need of some of the security and privacy aspects that we're trying to implement as we leverage artificial intelligence. My name is Ashwini Jewell. I'm the advisor at the IJIS Institute, with the executive director. With me today, joining on the webinar are Stacy Wright, Director of Cyber Threat Intelligence, and Patrick Lowe. Patrick is Chief Executive Officer of Privacy Horizon, Inc. So let me just start by introducing Stacy Wright. Stacy currently serves as the Director of Cyber Threat Intelligence for CyberWar. She's a cybersecurity and threat intelligence professional within U.S. intelligence community. Stacy, I know some of the folks I'm looking who are in attendance know Stacy. She's very well respected and is a known individual in our community. She's a national speaker on cybersecurity and cybercrime. And she has been a great friend and a supporter of the IJIS Institute over the years. So welcome, Stacy. Next joining me is Patrick Lowe. As I said, he serves as the Chief Executive Officer of Privacy Horizon. Patrick is new to IJIS Institute, but Patrick is very well respected when it comes to the security and privacy domain. He specializes in providing privacy compliance expertise and solutions to government agencies and private sector. In addition to his executive roles, Patrick is also an instructor at the National Institute for Health Informatics, formerly the Waterloo Institute for Health Informatics Research. And his specialty is where he teaches workshops on e-health privacy, including agile privacy impact assessment methodology, privacy and security, and also as our favorite subject is the European Union General Data Protection Regulation, also known as GDPR. So Patrick is very well respected internationally when it comes to privacy and security. To kick off this webinar, I just want to state a couple of things here. Is the reason we decided to do this webinar was as we are starting our artificial intelligence working group at the IJIS Institute, one of the questions that has been brought to our attention is how we're going to address the security and privacy. So at IJIS Institute, we do have a cybersecurity working group. Stacy Wright is part of that working group, which is actually actively looking at some of the work that National Institute of Science and Technology is doing in context of the cyber risk management framework and including the AI as part of that framework. So we will have a separate webinar on that. But what we thought was that why not start our journey by some of the best practices that already exist, and that's what we thought we'll talk about privacy by design concept. So if we go to the next slide. And as we look at today's topic, we're going to just talk about justice and public safety. That is where IJIS Institute plays a leadership role, and why it is very complex to implement some of the AI capabilities and why security and privacy matters. So we'll talk about that. We'll cover a quick misconception and misunderstanding of AI within the justice and public safety, and even in general public. We'll talk about some of the security and privacy risks. We'll talk in detail about some of the 7 principles that exist for privacy by design and how we can actually implement those principles as we look at security and privacy in context of artificial intelligence. And we'll leave some time for Q&A at the end. Next. So I'm sure a lot of folks have seen this slide. This slide explains the justice and public safety ecosystem that exists in the United States today. Internationally, it does map to some of this workflow, but this flow was done in 1967. Just to put this in context, it definitely needs an update, and IJIS Institute is working with some of the federal agencies and state and local justice and public safety agencies to update this chart. But this chart actually explains the complexity of the justice and public safety ecosystem. When somebody actually comes in contact within the justice and public safety system, whether that's through 911 call, whether through that call for service when somebody shows up, or when the traffic stop is made, or whatever the incident or event or the crime is, that it starts your interaction with criminal justice ecosystem, including public safety. And we're going to use the term justice and public safety together here. And when you look at these different color codings here, what you will see is that our journey starts with the 911 call for service. And within that ecosystem, we have a system, we have a different workflow. Then handoff takes place to the policing community, or also known as law enforcement. We have different stakeholders, different systems. So what you see is not only the workflow and how the process works, but also the blue boxes display the different systems that are used in each of these mission areas. And when you look at this information flow that happens from the time somebody comes in contact to the time they leave the justice and public safety lifecycle, they have gone through different systems, different processes, different workflows, different data sets that are collected or utilized to perform the different functions in justice and public safety. So now when we look at the data, or when we look at including artificial intelligence-based capabilities, whether those capabilities driven or the functionality driven, we have to be mindful of the complexity of this ecosystem. But above all, this is very regulated mission area. That means we always have to be mindful of the security and privacy aspect that is the core fundamental driver for justice and public safety information sharing ecosystem. Let's go to the next slide. So one of the things that we started looking at was that as we look at justice and public safety, it is not as simple as just using the word AI. There are different types of artificial intelligence that we have to look at and make some decisions. So when we look at reactive, where does that fit into the justice and public safety mission area? When we go to the next AI area, which is the limited memory, which we all know of, where we are looking at generative AI. That is the big buzzword that a lot of folks are talking about. But the question is that, are we ready to use generative AI? Do we have the right set of policies? Do we have the security and privacy framework to address that? Then theory of mind. We know we have long ways to go there. Self-aware is the other one. But where does justice and public safety should explore and start their journey? Some of the capabilities are already being implemented in some of the justice and public safety mission areas. Some of the solution providers have done a fantastic job of developing a technology through concepts like object recognition, visual recognition, and those kind of things, and virtual assistant chatbots. So we are already using it, but we have to look at the broad aspect of different flavors of AI that come with it. But not only we have to look at the different types of AI, but when we go to the next chapter of the AI is what kind of AI system we want to develop in justice and public safety. Thanks to OpenAI initiatives, where we do have a lot of cool innovation happening. So we have a lot of publicly curated data where we can actually leverage that to build OpenAI models. But the question is justice and public safety okay using that public set data, not knowing the quality of that data, not knowing what the confidence level of the public is in that data that is out there in public domain, or we did need to look at the closed AI where we have to address the security and privacy, and we have to build something where we can trust our own data and not just bring the public data set to build our AI models. And the next question that we are exploring is that, is it open or just closed AI conversation? Or is it a hybrid AI we have to look at? So these are some of the things that we are looking at, is that no matter what type of AI system you're looking at, that security and privacy is the front and center of this discussion as we bring these capabilities and implement them in justice and public safety agencies, and also as the solution providers are developing and innovating the technology or the different capabilities, that how they're addressing privacy and security. So if you go to the next one thing that we want to talk about is that in addition to these different types of AI, what is happening and what is our understanding of AI? While everybody talks about AI, what are the different aspects of AI? What are the different misconceptions and misunderstandings? So I will turn over to Stacy to cover some of that, to talk about that. So as we collectively, as a community, are looking to implement AI-based capabilities or using it, that we need to be mindful of how to address some of the concerns or issues that are arising from legislative side, but also from the public side. So Stacy?
Thanks, Ashwini. Hi, everybody. So I get to be kind of the Debbie Downer in this presentation and look at some of the negative aspects. I think a quote from Duke University put it really well. AI will either save the world from its many current challenges or destroy humanity as we know it. And I think we're kind of on the cusp of figuring out which one. I am trying to aim for saving the world, and I think there's a lot of possibilities, but we have to get through some of the current misunderstandings and challenges and conceptions behind AI before we can move to that hopefully better future. Next slide, please. So this is a topic I have actually spoken on before. My cybercrime is not your cybercrime. Well, that holds true for AI as well. My AI is not your AI. We think about things differently. Now, I'm a Gen Xer. So when I think of what TV shows I was raised with, MacGyver comes to mind first off, but I watched Chips and CSI. And these were the kinds of television shows that actually directed me into a law enforcement career. I think about cyber in a certain way. Cyber for Gen Xers is often used as a tool. The internet is a tool, and there's some intuitive understanding, but it's not really a native understanding. If you're one of the baby boomers, then maybe you think about this entirely differently. Computers are a tool that you got when you became a professional, as opposed to me, who was lucky enough to have them because I'm in the late end of the Gen Xers in high school and middle school. So this is something that I can say I grew up with and am used to working with, but it's not really native. Gen Y, millennials, on the other hand, are very much native to understanding cyber. And that means they look at how computers work very differently than I or anyone older than I do. When we get to Gen Z is intuitive. They grew up with computers in their hands, they grew up with cell phones. Their first memories probably involve electronic devices of some type. So this is a truly native environment, but they're in school now as all this AI stuff is coming out. They are going to enter a workforce where AI is in use, and we think about it as AI. And then Gen Alpha, the generation that is our children's age, that generation is going to enter a workforce that looks completely different than ours does today. So, what I really want to get at here is what you're thinking about AI and what the person sitting next to you is thinking about, what your chief or commissioner or other executive is thinking about, is going to be very different than you, especially if you come from different generations, just because change is so fast right now. Next slide, please. Now, for all that we're talking about AI as new, and this really started with the ChatGPT becoming a very public thing at the end of the last 2 years. It's not new. And you knew I was going to somehow fit Terminator and RoboCop into here because you kind of have to do it on a presentation about AI. But the reality is, when we're talking about AI, we've been using it all along. We just aren't calling it AI. We're calling it machine learning or natural language processing or something along those lines. Some examples I can give you: facial and speech recognition. That's in use right now. We know jails and prisons in China are actually using facial recognition to keep track of where inmates are. Obviously, China as a whole, we heard about it in the Beijing Olympics, was playing with facial recognition. And here in the US and North America in general, we've looked at facial recognition, and there are some laws and proposed laws that really limit our ability because of the privacy concerns associated with it. But you can take this further. That machine vision concept includes automated license plate readers, those LPRs that we're all used to using. That's really a machine learning type of artificial intelligence. When we get into something like shot spotters, the more advanced shot spotters right now aren't just listening for the sound of that gunfire, they are actually looking for weapons. So almost predictive in a way, in that they're trying to find places where somebody has pulled a gun, even if the gun hasn't gone off, no shots have been fired. We're doing fingerprint matching based on machine learning and all types of vision enhancements and machine vision type analysis. Chatbots, automated voice systems, CAD, autonomous vehicles, and drones. These are all things we run into on a fairly regular basis, for good or bad. And we haven't been used to calling it AI, but the reality is it is AI. It was just a slightly simpler version of it. So, as you're thinking about AI for your department, chances are you're actually using it currently. So, the real trick is to understand that AI is not new, it's just a new buzzword being used to describe something that we've been doing for years. Next slide, please. The problem is AI doesn't really understand context or empathy yet in that way that lets it take those into account. So this is where Ashwini was talking about theory of mind. This is a stage we haven't reached. And it means that you, as somebody who is engaging in a situation, you know if that person taking a picture through a fence, are they suspicious, or are they just somebody taking a picture because they want a picture of the bridge or the celebrity or whomever? The context of people's facial expressions, that makes a huge difference. If we were to try and use AI to record this conversation, it's going to pick up something very different than you're hearing me say, because so much of our communication is nonverbal. So all of this comes into our understanding, and it's really about recognizing and thinking about the fact that AI doesn't understand context, doesn't understand empathy. So we need to notice humans need to understand the limitations of AI and our approach. There are some medical devices that are looking at how to do this. I think some of these are going to be really great. Like, imagine if you could determine that someone most likely has autism before you approach them. That might be a different way to talk, might be a different way to approach or understand what they are saying. AI will get us there. We're just not quite there yet, which brings me to the next one. And I sort of touched on this already. We do use AI. If you are using any of these devices out there, Apple Intelligence or Google's Gemini, Microsoft Copilot, you're using AI already. Grammarly is really a AI system with a large language model. If you have to connect a system to the internet to use it, you're probably somehow getting involved in AI. I threw up a Facebook picture. Yes, that's me. No, I'm not giving you my actual Facebook login name, and I don't friend request anybody I don't know or accept those requests. So please don't try. But notice right there in the middle of the screen, right with AI, it is letting us right there and make changes to our text to make things a little bit better. So we have all of these options when we book a vacation on one of the big travel websites. That's using AI. When we look for fraud detection in financial crimes, they are using a type of predictive analysis to figure out if your bank transactions have changed. Football and baseball, and I'm naming those because they're happening right now, they're all using AI. So this is incorporated into our daily personal lives as well. Next slide, please. Another misconception is that AI is trustworthy. We kind of have this innate view that we should trust things we read. And I thought about putting the Abraham Lincoln quote up here about don't trust everything you read on the internet, but I ran out of slide space. What I do want to get at, though, is AI is only trustworthy when it's complete, diverse, and accurate. So we're looking at how to make the data complete, how to make it diverse, but also how to make sure it's accurate. And since we as humans have different viewpoints of accuracy, that's probably going to be an extreme challenge. Now, in a couple of slides, I'm going to talk about the different types of attacks we're seeing against AI systems. And you will notice that most of the attacks trace back to making sure the data is incomplete or biased in some way or inaccurate in some other way. So you'll see these different attack vectors coming into play. Now, I think the unsupervised learning, supervised learning, and reinforced learning, when you think about it, we sort of all know what this is. But this is where AI is. We have unsupervised learning, where it's going out and just grabbing data and trying to learn itself. We have supervised learning, where humans are behind the systems and putting things into a little bit more context, doing some work to clean up the data. And then when you ask queries of some of these systems, we get reinforced learning because there's the potential to provide feedback and say, no, this wasn't correct. Doesn't mean it actually fixes anything, as that one particular chat GPT example shows us. The other thing about AI is it's not trustworthy because it can't understand us fully yet. If you haven't seen it, the YouTube video with these two Scottish guys in the elevator is a perfect example of this. I know AI is having real difficulty understanding people with particular accents, like a Boston accent. If we park the car in the Harvard Yard, it's going to be a problem. Or New York or Texas. Those different accents cause issues. Next slide, please. The other thing is we have this innate sense of a right to privacy. And when you look at AI, that's actually not the case. That's a true misunderstanding or misconception. AI specifically says, and I've put some quotes here from ChatGPT, that they're going to keep your data and they're going to use it. They talk about data persistence, as in the data will last longer than you who created it. They talk about data repurposing. So they'll take the queries you ask and the answers they provided and use that to train the system, which means if you're uploading a court case or a file or say something you want to turn into a better report, ChatGPT and all the other systems like it have the right to keep that information and use it. They're supposed to de-anonymize it, but we'll see how that goes. Now, when we actually do this, we get data spillover as well. So if you upload a report and it's talking about a victim or a litigant or somebody else, then we're talking about that data being incorporated into the AI system without that person's knowledge or awareness or approval. I specifically mention this because if you read between the lines on some of these chat GPT terms, you will find there's some real interesting things. Like they say that you can use a phone number for 3 different accounts. But if you delete one of those accounts, that phone number is still tied to that account. So there is definitely data being kept behind. They know that deleted account still went to your phone number. So there's some correlations we have to do in the background and understand how all this data is being incorporated. But we really need to understand that we don't have a right to privacy. I've heard of police officers using ChatGPT and other systems to help write their reports when they get done with a particular incident. And this is something where that innate sense of we have a right to privacy is being misunderstood because that right does not exist with AI in its current states. Next slide, please. So shifting the conversation a little bit from these problems that we don't tend to think about when it comes to AI to the security and privacy risks. As one particular document put it, is AI ready for deployment today is probably a bad question. What we should be asking is how can we be proactive co-creators of an intelligent criminal justice future that balances the risks of opportunities with this new technology. So just for fun, I asked ChatGPT for a list of its security risks, and I think that list on the left is a pretty decent list of security risks. I did actually read through it myself. I'm not putting it up there without cross-checking that it's not mentioning salesfish or something else in there. But I want to especially call out bias and discrimination because that's one that affects us most as practitioners. The other one is that lack of transparency. And that gets back into the whole misconception that we have a right to privacy. And then regulatory and compliance risks. So I would ask you, if you have AI in use, and you know it's in use because it doesn't work unless you can reach out to the internet and that system or app or software is connected to the internet, then if that's on your CJIS system, are we actually adhering to the CJIS security policy? That's going to be a question that we need to figure out over the next couple of years. The Technical Committee on Securing Artificial Intelligence gives us 4 different security standardizations. Those are on the right, so that's the human thought, and you will see this is pretty much a very similar list, just a little bit higher level. Next slide, please. So I said I was going to mention attacks. Here's the list of attacks that we are seeing, and this list is accurate within about the last 6 months. It comes from DHS. So obviously we're seeing deep fakes and we're seeing morphing attacks. Morphing attacks are frequently referred to as deep fakes, but these are attacks where you take a picture and modify only part of the picture. So you have a little bit of a morph, just a little bit of a change in there. Evasion attacks are where you're actually intentionally trying to manipulate the AI-based input so it changes and deceives the AI model. So misclassification is the goal here. It's trying to get to unintended or incorrect results, but it's more about not producing misinformation or disinformation, more along the misinformation or just bad information side of the house. These could be jokes where you could be putting in data that makes the output something completely ridiculous, like a movie quote, as opposed to a quote by Abraham Lincoln talking about the internet. Data poisoning is that malicious side. This is where we very much get into misinformation and malinformation. So the attack is where you, again, inject data into the input stream to intentionally corrupt what the AI system understands and how it thinks. The whole idea is to modify the behavior itself of what we refer to as the black box. So AI systems, part of why they're so powerful is this black box concept. We don't actually know how some of the most powerful systems are thinking and learning. And I'll get to that a little bit more in a moment. Model extraction is where you actually try to reverse engineer the AI system. You try and understand it based on its queries and responses. Inference attacks are where you're actually trying to get data used about the training itself. So this could be as simple as, was my data included in the training? But it could also be as complex as, was data fed into the system from one political side or the other? Was data inputted into the system by a particular country as opposed to neutral data? And then inverting the objective. So if the AI system can actually learn features that are important for a specific task, we can reverse it, basically pull a 180. If you can do a specific task really well, that means you can also undo the specific task really well. And this is where we can get into things like maybe breaking encryption or some of the other concepts that could be a lot more scary. Next slide, please. So I said black box, hidden layers. We know the data we're putting into an AI system. We know the output data that we're getting out of the system. How the system thinks in the middle is really that black box concept, these hidden layers. We don't know precisely what is taking the input, what it's being aligned with compared to connected with, and how they get to the output. That's something that we are working to understand. The UK National Cybersecurity Centre has a great paper on this and other concepts related to AI in the criminal justice, public safety sectors. And they give some definitions about how we are working towards being able to explain AI. But at this point, there is no way for us to take the very complex systems and explain how a conclusion was reached. Next slide, please. Obviously, all of this between the attacks, the black box concepts, all of that adds into their inherent dangers to AI. So what the White House has done is put forward a blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights. And this came out of the October 30th, 2023 executive order on the safe, secure, and trustworthy development and use of AI. So that executive order incorporates a bunch of different documents and requirements for the US government, but it also has this blueprint for the Bill of Rights to help us get to a point where we can safely look at a system and say, yes, it is trustworthy, it is unbiased, it's accurate. And that's what they're trying to do with this basic Bill of Rights. I am sure before it's finalized, we will see numerous other drafts, but this is getting us to that stage. Next slide, please. So all of this, how do you deal with it? Risk assessments are probably the base starting point for the systems you already have in use. Again, the UK Cyber Centre has published questions. I've added a few questions in blue where I thought there were some components for public safety to look at in specifically. I would also point out that in number 2, talking about everyone involved in machine learning deployment understands what is being done enough that they can make a decision. I would take the OJP specification that it's also discussed in an open and ongoing dialogue with the community. I think that in our case, the people involved in the deployment include that community. How reliable is the tool, where we're looking into number 4. This is where we also have work being done by NIST right now to put in considerations and do some testing and get us some better answers. And then number 9, OJP also points out that for us in our specific community, we should be looking at technical feasibility, ethical appropriateness, and operational achievability of AI solutions. I am adding in all the stuff in blue along with that last question of how is the public going to respond. Now, the NIST framework on the right is probably one of the best, slightly more technical resources out there. And I put this crosswalk document in here because I know not everybody uses NIST. The NIST series is great, but it's a starting point. So this actually takes the NIST AI and compares it to ISO and the other documents that you might actually be using either here in the United States or around the world. These are also in several languages. And next slide, please. So this brings me to deployment. There is one final thing I'm going to mention here, and the Five Eyes put out this document that includes how to deploy AI safely and securely. So this is a Five Eyes document to help us understand the concepts. It's well worth reading. It will get you started on your way. Now, in addition to all of those links that I just mentioned, I threw in one final slide that you can read, and that's just got a few more links out there. The OJP specific library, that one is very much something that you should look into, because it's not just about court systems, but they also have ones for criminal justice leaders, law enforcement, corrections, forensics, and so on. And these are based on the concepts of privacy, fairness, transparency, security, and accountability. So all the things that I just sort of summed up into misconceptions, but also into the varying risks and how we get there with cybersecurity. Which brings us to the really cool stuff. And I have to, unfortunately, hand it over to Patrick. I would love to keep going, but Patrick does this next section in a superb way. So Patrick, you're up.
Great. Thank you, Stacy. Let's talk about the next slide, please. So what's privacy by design? Privacy by design actually is a concept that involves embedding privacy into design and operation of IT systems, which include your AI system, for example, network infrastructure and business practices. The privacy by design was developed by Dr. Ann Kovakian. She was the former Information Privacy Commissioner of Ontario in Canada. The core idea is to ensure that privacy is considered from the outset and throughout the entire life cycle of a product or services. Again, when you talk about AI, it could be AI products or services that delivered by AI in this case. Stacy mentioned a lot of good information related to AI, whether it's risk, whether it's best practices, and whatever she mentioned in her presentation actually align, most of them align to the privacy by design principles, which I'm going to provide more information and background. And by the way, privacy by design is increasingly referenced in global privacy legislations. For example, in GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation in Europe, it has specific reference about privacy by design requirements to satisfy that legislation. And there's proposed privacy legislation in Canada, they include the AI and Data Act, reference a lot of privacy by design principles. In countries like Brazil have the privacy legislation, also reference to privacy by design. So as you can see that more and more countries, when they're developing privacy legislation, they also reference privacy by design as a good principle to be adopted to ensure that you comply with privacy, use those kind of principles to address your privacy requirements. Next slide. So what's privacy by design? I mentioned about principles. There are 7 foundational principles, and I will go over each one of them in more detail. There are actually 7 of them that, there are different types of principles, in a global setting. You hear about the, fair information practices. There are 7 principles. In Canada, we have CSA, Privacy Practice Model Code, 10 privacy principles. But for privacy design, it has 7 principles that you should consider when you want to build your solutions or deploy your solutions with your services. And again, most of the wording here that you can appreciate based on what Stacy had presented earlier, that you can align a map into the privacy by design principle. Next slide, please. So let's go over each one of them so you can give you some understanding what are those principles, what do they mean, right? Principle on its own is hard to take into consideration for adoption, for example, and what kind of requirements that you should consider by addressing those principles or put those requirements in place to make sure that you conform to those principles. So principle number 1 is about proactive, not reactive, preventative, not remedial. What it means that for example, it anticipates and prevents privacy invasive even before they happen. Okay, so you want to do something proactively to prevent something bad from happening. And privacy design does not wait for privacy risk to materialize, and it comes before the fact, not after. So you can appreciate that you have to start thinking about what you need to put in place before you go live with your deployment with an AI solution, for example, right? So I think Stacey mentioned a few things there. Could be a policy, could be a governance, AI governance, who is responsible and to make sure that you have policy in place, who is accountable to make sure that provide oversight to make sure that your solution, your IT infrastructure is running according to the specification, for example. And one of the things that I think Stacey also mentioned about risk assessment. There is one of the common risk management tool called privacy impact assessments. This is a tool that actually can help you assess and identify your project or solution initiative before you go live to ensure that there are no privacy risks that will impact on an individual privacy rights, for example. So this is a very useful, meaningful tools that can help you proactively identify risks and help you mitigate or address those risks you identify before you go live with your solution, for example. So PII is an important tool. If you're not aware of this, you can reach out to me. I can talk to you more about what is the PII, how to go about doing it. Next slide. The second principle is about privacy is a default setting. Okay, privacy by design seeks to deliver maximum privacy by ensuring that personal data are automatically protected by any given IT system or business practice. The thing is, when we talk about default, it means that if an individual does nothing, their privacy still remain intact, right? For example, just in social media setting, right? If you want to deploy a social media platform, a lot of time you go to social media, set a profile, you want a profile to be public, or private, we have a choice. But why do we want to make a customer, consumer, individual, use the private setting to protect the privacy? Why don't we set it as a default? Every profile is private unless the individual want to choose that they want the profile to be public so everyone can see them, right? So from a privacy perspective, that's what it means. We set privacy as a default setting. Okay, so that's something that when you design the solutions, especially from an AI perspective, think about it from point of view, right? Default setting could, for example, could be something that you must collect minimum data sets, right? Default, don't collect more information than necessary. Okay, it could be before you embark on something that an initiative, define the scope and purposes, right? So that when you design something, the system can provide a default setting based on the purposes, based on respecting individual privacy rights. And the other thing is, we talk about facial recognition, right? You want to think about default setting. Why not have something that can delete data if the data it's been around for a specific time frame, or an individual will not be charged for any criminal acts, for example, things like that. Then you can remove data by using AI, set it as a default setting, for example, rather than human being intervention. So let's give you some example of what default setting means. Okay, so next slide, please. The third principle is talking about privacy embedded into design. But privacy embedded into design and architecture, IT system, and business processes. Okay, it becomes an essential component of core functionality being delivered. Okay, this is something that you talk about very often. You look at system design, you have architecture documents, you have a system documentation, and you have security control. But you should start thinking about, why don't we have something that relates to privacy control that can build into your system? Okay, the privacy control could relate to something about think about from the life cycle of data perspective, right? If you want to collect information, right, what are the type of privacy control you should put in place from a collection or creation perspective to the use and disclosure and destruction point of view. So think about it from that perspective, using privacy control embed into each phases or each part of your design of your solutions. Okay, and the other thing is starting about from design point of view, should we include, for example, other like change management, from the operation perspective. When you do make some change from change management perspective, make sure privacy concept, privacy control, privacy best practices are embedded into your operation procedure, including change management. So that's, again, it's an example, and something that's without any documentation, no one would appreciate what you need to do. So use put privacy into documentation so everyone will be on the same page when you design and develop a solution. Next slide, please. So full functionality, this is the fourth principle. Talk about positive sum, not zero sum. Okay. Privacy by design accommodates all legitimate interests and objectives in a positive sum or win-win manner. Okay. Because very often when we do something, right, there's a zero-sum concept, someone will win and someone will lose, things like that. So we want to make sure that, for example, you talk about public safety versus privacy. There's no such thing as private safety and privacy, or privacy versus security. No, it's not choose one over the other. You should work together, right? So just for example, we talk about let's talk about video surveillance, for example, and we just don't want to record a video to identify individual in specific area. So, but you want to protect private safety issue, then you want to, so that you don't want to sacrifice privacy by recording everybody, right? So one way you can do a win-win situation, you can have a recording or surveillance in specific area, but you blur out the face of the individual unless there's something event that warrant you to unmask those individuals for investigation purposes. In that case, you achieve both privacy and security, or public safety, for example. That's what I mean by positive sum, not one or the other. You don't choose it, right? So that's a concept. It's not, easy to kind of implement. You have to start thinking about, by doing something good, are we sacrificing something? Okay, and when you use the word sacrificing something, that's not positive sum. That's zero sum. So you have to be clever, have that discussion before you do something in your initiative, to ask yourself that, am I respecting individual privacy, or am I sacrificing something? Okay, next slide. And the fifth principle is talk about end-to-end security, full life cycle protection. This one is quite straightforward. We're talking about data protection from a security perspective. Make sure that it talk about entire life cycle from start to finish, not just one piece or one process, one phases, for example. It's all talk about, from beginning creation to destruction of data, okay, from cradle to grave point of view. So I think there are a lot of standards out there. I think Stacey mentioned a few of them from security perspective, and also she mentioned about AI attacks. What you should put together, put in place to prevent all the AI attacks. Or you can look at different standards that can help you. NIST have a lot of good information out there to help from a data protection perspective. And I think that one of the things that Stacey mentioned about is a technical committee for secure AI, that you can leverage those kind of information to help you to satisfy this principle to protect data accordingly. Next slide. Okay. Visibility and transparency, keep it open. This is transparency. It again, you talk about when you develop something, right? You need to make sure that, especially from an AI perspective, you make sure that you have some information to explain to the individual or the public what is the solution about, what information you're collecting, what kind of purposes you're trying to accomplish, what kind of safeguard you put in place, right? And sometimes, depending again your technology, that you may want to make sure that you inform individual about consent. And also, I think Stacey mentioned about explainable AI. If there's something that you can inform individual, if they ask question about, explain to me about your AI algorithm. It's not easy, but again, so there's information out there perhaps that you can use to help you put those kind of information together to communicate with the general public or your stakeholders. And also, in talk about visibility and transparency, we can refer to public engagement. discussion before deploy any technology or solution out there, so that the general public are fully aware what you're trying to do and feel confident, feel comfortable, and have, in a way to build trust to make sure that your solution can be deployed effectively. So those some things, keep it open, is like be transparent enough to get people to buy in, for example. Okay, next slide, please. The last principle, again, quite related to the previous principle. We talk about respect for user privacy and keep it user-centric. What it means is that, everything you need to do, right, make sure that you respect, the human rights and non-discriminatory kind of process, or non-biased kind of outcomes that you have when you build your AI. So think about individual, keep it centric, right? Non-bias means a lot, depending on how you want to deploy a solution, about data accuracy issue that you want to put together, and things like that. So again, think of it from the user perspective, from an individual point of view, how your solution will impact on them, and also if you want to put out a consent solution, make sure individual fully comprehend and understand what they are consenting to, right? No, don't make it complicated. Again, that's where you talk about keep it user-centric and privacy notice. And if someone say, I want to know about how your solution, again, I mentioned earlier, that your notice should be easily explainable to individual about your practices. And also, keep it centric also means that respecting individual privacy rights. If they want to access to their own information, what you have on them, should have a facility or a practice or process put in place to enable to happen. Or individual may say, I don't want you to keep my information anymore. The phrase we can derive from the GDPR is about right to be forgotten, right? I don't want you to keep my information at all. So you must have put in place a mechanism or process to delete the data. And the other one is, right to expunge information if you're collecting information for mugshot, for example, law enforcement. If individual is no longer a suspect or going to be charged, is there a way that individual can expunge the information in the database? I'm using it as an example. So those concepts are as part of the respecting for user privacy, keep it user-centric. So those are the 7 privacy by design principles, and you can appreciate a lot of those. Actually, all of those principles can be mapped to any guidelines, framework, legislation, and it is more a structured way to help you think, put your process in place, or consider those kind of principles for map to your practices, your solutions, or what you need to deploy, or what need to consider before you embark on your AI journey. Next slide. So implementation of price design and AI deployment. I am not going to, next slide, please. I'm not going to go over all of them. I think we have time constraint here. I think this slide that will be shared with the attendees, or at least this part here. This is an example of how to implement AI solutions, something you need to consider using price of design. I have given some example and also the implementation consideration in more detail when I mentioned earlier about some example, right? Again, you can take a look at that, and any questions about the example or how to implement the price of designs principle, feel free to reach out to me. Philip Ashwani, I think we should open up for some questions. I know we are running out of time.
Thanks, Patrick. And so if folks have questions, please type in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So as Patrick said, we will share the slides with attendees here, registered attendees, and you will see what we have been able to explain is how to take each of those 7 principles and how you map it to the different aspects of your AI implementation strategy. So while we're waiting for a few questions, I just want to ask, Stacy, going back to you, is that as NIST is looking at that, and there's just so much going around the security and privacy, what are some of the three things that you will say that agencies or solution providers who are working with the justice and public safety agencies consider in implementing AI capability, or if they're already using what they should have already in place to ensure that the security and privacy is already built in?
I think I told you to give me the easy questions, please. In a lot of ways, I would look at this as to whether the AI is assisting humans, humans are assisting AI, or if it's completely anonymous. And then by extension, if we're dealing with possible repercussions that would result in harm to humans, harm to organizations, or harm to the ecosystem. So when you're talking to a vendor or somebody else, it's about understanding their base cybersecurity, but also understanding the impacts of failure of their system should you implement it.
Thanks, Stacy. And so we do have a question here, and I can answer that. Is IJIS partnering with ISCP to issue guidance for law enforcement agencies on AI? So answer is yes. We have an artificial intelligence working group where we have extended the invitation to all justice and public safety associations, not just law enforcement, because what we are learning that everybody's facing the same questions that need to be addressed. So we are basically have extended. So we are absolutely working with ISCP. ISCP is actually a great partner on our law enforcement advisory committee. So working with ISCP, just to put as a reference, National Sheriff's Association, National Center for State Courts, National District Attorney Association. And I will just make a plug here. We're also hosting an Artificial Intelligence Summit for Justice and Public Safety on September 4th and 5th. We do have participation from all of these associations and the presenters who represent these associations. So answer is yes. The next question is, are there any frameworks built to work through AI implementation with regard to CA guidance, California guidance on race-blind charging? So, Stacy or Patrick, if you know the answer.
So I am not aware of any that specifically look at race-blind charging. I know quite a few documents that look at it. OGP has put out several, the EU has put out several, but I'm not aware of any frameworks themselves.
Me either. No.
Yeah, we're not, but we can definitely look further. So next request is for you, Stacy. It's from Velda, I'm working on a product to help police know they are in the presence of someone with cognitive disabilities, example, autism. May I contact Miss Stacy Wright directly? So
absolutely. Anybody's welcome to contact me. My email address is Stacy, STACEY, at cyberwa.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn fairly easily.
Yeah. All right, Stacy, next question is for you. So it's from Jim Cabral. So Ashwin has the question of whether additional security concerns of OpenAI models make closed models more appropriate for justice and public safety application. What does Stacy think?
I think closed models probably will be. I think we're looking at something very similar to where we have cloud and then gov cloud. I think we are moving to a stage where we're going to have AI and then gov AI. And so that gives us that extra security that is mandated for government, or at least that's what I'm hoping we're moving towards.
Sure. Patrick, do you want to add something from your observation sitting outside the US?
No, I think the law principle are quite similar, right? How, you know, in terms of respecting individual privacy, right? You know, and by mind you, right? Privacy legislation, or privacy is not an absolute right, okay? And there are some allowance there for you know, to enable organization, agency to get information without consent, for example, right? You have to know what legislation or framework or standard applies to your organization and your jurisdiction, right? At the end of the day, okay, one or two I mentioned just now is the privacy impact assessment, okay? It's a very useful tool for you to conduct assessment of your solutions before it go live. Because the privacy impact assessment is a structured approach to assess privacy risk. It will take into consideration of the legislation requirements. Talk about your data flow analysis, your controls that you put in place, and things like that. So think about that from that perspective to help you to address the privacy issue before you go live.
And thanks for saying that, stating that,
Yeah.
Patrick, because I think that goes back to Jim's question also, that those assessments will be determine what kind of models, because that's one thing we're learning. It's not just as Stace was talking about, okay, there's commercial cloud versus gov cloud. It's based on your requirements, your needs, right? Same thing is going to happen here, is what type of capabilities, what type of privacy and security concerns you have to address, right? So absolutely that is, and I think those assessments can be very helpful. So we have one last question. Assume the recording will be made available to the group. Answer is absolutely yes. So you all who have registered will be getting the link to the recording once we publish the final version of this webinar. So I know we are 2 minutes over our time, but we would like to thank everyone that attended this webinar, but especially Patrick, to you and Stacy, thank you so much for participating in this webinar. I will also make a plug once again. We are hosting an Artificial Intelligence Summit for Justice and Public Safety in Reston, Virginia on September 4th and 5th. If you have not registered for that summit, we will encourage you to register. So I'd like to thank everyone and have a good day. And also, if you have any questions, please reach out back to us and we will send the link out for the webinar. Thank you.